I'm Steve Yoder, and today on Abbreviated Bios, we'll look at a career soldier who was rejected by West Point for being too short, yet became an overachieving officer who would win a Medal of Honor in the Philippines. His name was Frederick Funston. Frederick Funston was born on November 9, 1865 in New Carlisle, Ohio, to Edward and Ann Funston. From the age of 4, he grew up in Allen County, Kansas. He was made fun of by his peers and seemed to be a disappointment to his father because of his short stature. He would grow to only 5 foot 4 inches. After high school, he applied to West Point but was rejected for having poor grades and being too short. After this rejection, Funston held a variety of jobs over the next few years. He attended the University of Kansas but never graduated. He was employed by the Department of Agriculture and participated in scientific expeditions as a botanist to the Dakota Badlands, Death Valley, California, and Alaska. He spent the winter of 1893 to 94 alone on the banks of the Klondike River. He constructed a boat in the spring and paddled 1,500 miles down the Yukon to the Pacific and boarded a ship to California. Later, he tried to establish a coffee plantation in Central America, but it failed, and he then became the deputy comptroller of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railroads for a while. An event in 1896 finally put him on the road to becoming a military officer. He heard a speech in New York by Civil War General Daniel Sickles in favor of the Cuban fight for independence from Spain. Funston was inspired and he joined the Cuban Revolutionary Army and became an artillery captain. He trained himself in that skill. During his time in Cuba, he fought in 22 battles, was wounded in both lungs and an arm. He also contracted malaria and only weighed 80 pounds when he was shipped back to America in 1898. While he was recovering, the Spanish-American War broke out. He was appointed colonel of the 20th Kansas Regiment of the Kansas National Guard. The unit was sent to train at the Presidio in San Francisco. While there, he met Ida Blankhart. They hit it off so well that they were married 2 days later on October 25, 1898. He shipped out to the Philippines 2 weeks later. The Spanish-American War had already been won by the U.S. by the time Funston arrived in the Philippines. But the Philippine insurrection was about to begin when the U.S. did not recognize the Philippines' Declaration of Independence. It began on February 4, 1899, when the Filipinos attacked American outposts around Manila. Funston's unit, which was nicknamed the Fighting 20th, fought so well and gained so much ground that he was promoted Brigadier General of Volunteers. Not the regular army, but the National Guard. In April, the 20th was stalled by Filipino resistance. On April 27, 1899, Funston devised the plan that enabled the stalled unit to cross the Rio Grande de la Pampanga and defeat the Filipino unit there. Funston and 2 of his soldiers would later be awarded the Medal of Honor for this action. By 1901, the Filipinos were fighting using guerrilla war tactics. Emilio Aguinaldo was a worthy opponent to the Americans. The American army tried to capture him a number of times and failed. Funston would come up with a plan that would succeed. Aguinaldo's personal courier had been captured. Funston got the information about where Aguinaldo was located from him. Aguinaldo was heavily guarded deep in the jungle. Funston's plan was to have 81 Macabebeo tribesmen who were loyal to the Americans take Funston and 4 other officers as prisoners to Aguinaldo. They looked just like the other Filipinos. Somehow, the complex plan worked and Aguinaldo was captured completely by surprise on March 29, 1901. Aguinaldo was transported to Manila and signed an allegiance to the United States, stating that by acknowledging and accepting the sovereignty of the United States throughout the entire archipelago, as I now do without any reservations whatsoever, I believe that I am serving thee, my beloved country. He urged all the other generals to surrender, and most did. For the most part, the Philippine insurrection was over. Funston was proclaimed a national hero. General Arthur MacArthur stated, The transaction was brilliant in conception and faultless in execution. All credit must go to Funston. His reward should be signal and immediate. And his reward was a commission of brigadier general in the regular army. At 35, he was the youngest general in the military. Funston was next placed in charge of the Presidio, a fort in San Francisco. And that's where he was when the earthquake of San Francisco in 1906 happened. Funston took charge of relief efforts after the earthquake. He mobilized the troops and began to blow up buildings to create fire breaks. Unfortunately, most of the explosives used for the fire breaks consisted of black powder, which sends out sparks when detonated. Almost every explosion started new fires. Funston also ordered looters to be shot on sight, which resulted in many innocent people being killed. He helped establish communications, sanitation, medical facilities, housing, and order in the city. So he was proclaimed a hero to the city because of this. By 1916, Funston was promoted to Major General. In 1917, as the U.S. was on the edge of entering World War I, President Wilson favored Funston taking command of all American troops. But it was not to be. On February 19, 1917, Funston died of a heart attack in San Antonio, Texas. He was considered so much of a hero that he was the first person to have his body lie in state at the Alamo and also at the City Hall Rotunda in San Francisco. He was buried in the cemetery at the Presidio. Frederick Funston led an eventful life, overcoming his short stature to become one of America's great military heroes. Thank you for listening to Abbreviated Bios. Love you to share this if you like it or subscribe.